we have turned our base on Cyprus, which is called RAF Akrotiri. I'm not sure if many people know about this, but we should know about it because it's another window into how our country operates around the world and the fact that the empire never died. Cyprus was a British colony. It got independence in 1960, but the British retained 3% of Cyprus, which we still own, and turned them into huge military and intelligence installations. And RAF Akrotiri, which is an airbase, has been the international hub for getting weapons, spies, other cargo to Israel for its genocide. Again, none of this has been in the mainstream media. We've revealed a lot of it at Declassified, and we've caused a massive upset in Cyprus itself. The president on both sides of the Cypriot border has had to comment on this and deny that Cyprus is involved in the genocide in Gaza. There's been huge protests at the base itself based on our work. So what I've just described is not a country which is complicit in what is happening in Gaza. It's a country which is participating, a direct participant. And in fact, all the ministers that have been in place while this policy has been in place, so Rishi Sunak, Grant Shapps, Keir Starmer, David Lammy, John Healey, they should all be getting arrest warrants from the ICC. Because if we do not prosecute these people who are involved in genocide and participating in genocide, then we basically announce that the world is the law of the jungle, and nothing good is going to come unless we hold the people to account who have done this. So that's the participation part of it. The complicity is the media itself. Now, they are complicit in two ways, main ways. One is that the mainstream media, and when I say the mainstream media, I include The Guardian, which is not an outlier, which is not a sort of oasis of truth in the British media. It's deeply embedded in the propaganda system that the rest of the papers are involved in. But they regurgitate endlessly Israeli propaganda. If you look at headlines, if an Israeli is killed, they'll say who killed the Israeli. If a Palestinian is killed, no one knows. It's a mystery. And these are not accidental ticks from these journalists. This is the fact that they enforce the propaganda of the Israelis. And they're doing that in a system where they won't go to prison. They might lose their job if they start doing proper journalism, but they won't go to prison. So they are complicit in that. And they're also complicit, and I think this is actually a much, much bigger way they're complicit, in the fact that they do not report the reality of what our role is in Gaza. You know, as I mentioned, we're participants. If the mainstream media reported it, there would be pressure on the government from a wide part of the society and the population to bring it to an end. Those spy flights would be grounded within a week. As I said, we're a small website, Declassified, because 4 people work there, and we've created an absolute storm in Cyprus, which has really impacted on the ability of the base to operate. And that's just 4 people. And can you imagine if the resources of the BBC or the Guardian were used to actually expose that role? They'd have to ground those planes within a week. So that is complicity. They are complicit because they're not telling the truth. They're not doing their job as journalists. And the government is aware of all this, which is why they are launching a massive crackdown on journalists and activists who are exposing their role, because it's dangerous. As I say, if the reality got out, not only would they be vulnerable prosecution, but there would be societal-wide efforts to stop them and stop the participation. So, but what's happened with ASA recently, before that, there was a raid on a journalist called Sarah Wilkinson, which I'm sure you're aware of, where it was another pre-dawn raid, and they bundled her into a police van. They tipped over the urn with her mum's ashes in. She had to clean it off the wall, interrogated her for hours. Richard Medhurst, another independent journalist, was detained at Heathrow Airport for 23 hours in solitary, and that we are winning. You know, it's a sign that they know that they have lost control of the population. They've lost control of the narrative despite owning the mainstream media. And they are having to discipline the population now through law. And I don't think it will work, because they can't send millions of us to prison. They can try, but they won't be able to. So the signal they're trying to send is to scare us into submission, to scare us to stop speaking out. but it should have the opposite impact, and it should make us want to go harder and expose more of the different elements of their support for this genocide. And I think it is having that impact, and I think that also speaking personally, but from a lot of people I speak to are irrevocably changed by what they've seen, because we've watched the most horrific things we've ever seen in our life: kids' heads blown off, thousands of kids mutilated, the most mutilated kids in any conflict in recent history. And we've seen our government support it all, and we've seen our media lie about it. The population is awake like never before. And that is hopeful for anyone who wants to fight for progressive change and fight for truth, because the empire has never been as this exposed. The media has never been exposed. So in that sense, the door is ajar, and we need to kick it in, and we need to keep pushing and expose the truth and expose the reality of how our society is run and in whose interests. I mean, the cost has been way too high in terms of what has brought about this realization. But I do believe that, unlike even the war in Iraq, which was the other major moral crisis of our time in this country, when we invaded Iraq illegally and killed up to 1 million people and devastated a region, it was a bit different then for a couple of reasons. One, social media wasn't around, so the media propaganda was much more saturation. It was very hard to circumvent that system and reveal the truth. Now you just need to look at your phone, and you've got citizen reporters in Gaza who are giving us the information, risking their lives. Over 177 now have been killed, and not killed, assassinated, targeted by the Israelis because they are doing their job and letting us all know. So they are heroes of our time, but of all time. And we need to look at that and look at what those people are risking and think, what are we doing? You know, we have, although they're being eviscerated now by this government, we do have some limited freedoms here. And if we're not using that freedom to expose what our government is doing, to expose our politicians and to expose our military, to expose the arms companies, to expose every element which is involved in this horrific crime, then we aren't doing our job properly as citizens or journalists, and we aren't being moral individuals. So, and I think many people say this to me. They say, I've seen too much now. It equips people with a bravery when you watch what the journalists in Gaza are doing, when you watch what activists are doing in Gaza. It has changed the psychology of a lot of people. And I think it's changed the collective consciousness of humanity, to be honest with you. And I don't think it's going to go away, because it's been going on for too long and we're not even at the end of it. Last night and the night before, Jabalia camp in northern Gaza is actually being annihilated. Like there's no signal there now. The Israelis have got rid of the signals. So the whole of northern Gaza, and particularly Jabalia camp, which has 100,000 people in it, is being annihilated in the dark with our government support. These are crimes that will echo down the ages. And personally, I did always think, what would I have done during the Nazi Holocaust? If I'd known what was happening, would I have taken on myself to try and stop it and do everything I can? Well, now I say to people, well, you know what you would have done in the Nazi Holocaust, because it's what you're doing now to stop what's going on in Gaza. So amongst all the horror, I do feel like there is hope. And I'm not just saying that to give false hope. I do feel like there is an awakening from people I speak to. And we, as a progressive movement, which is interested in truth, which is interested in freedom, need to crystallize that general awakening and push it forward and make it into a much bigger movement for not only stopping the genocide in Gaza, but for stopping the American empire, which is the key player in all this and is the most nefarious force around the world for smashing hope, for genociding indigenous people and creating a world of chaos that we don't want to live in.